Welcome to Life Stories, where one sealed envelope hidden in a child's backpack shattered everything a family thought they knew. Imagine walking into a room where every eye is waiting to see you fail, where your name has been erased not just from a will, but from memory itself. And just when you think you've come for closure, you uncover a truth so powerful, it makes forgiveness feel heavier than betrayal. This isn't just a story about inheritance. It's about the silence between fathers and daughters, the lies that fracture families, and the quiet courage it takes to face a room full of people who once turned their backs on you. Stay with us, because what starts as a final goodbye becomes something no one could have seen coming. Let's begin. The overhead light buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the long mahogany table. Everything in the room felt too clean, too still, like a courtroom just before a verdict. Ava Bennett tightened her grip on her daughter's hand. Harper, barely 8, looked up at her with wide, searching eyes, silently asking for reassurance that Ava wasn't sure she could give. They were late. Not by accident. Ava had lingered outside the Bennett estate for 10 whole minutes, her fingers trembling on the steering wheel as she watched luxury cars pull up one by one. The sprawling New England house loomed behind the wrought iron gate like a cathedral of cold memories. Walter Bennett's legacy. A place that once held bedtime stories and jazz records, now reduced to hushed voices and strategic glances. As they stepped into the room, all conversation ceased. Brooke sat at the head of the table, her blonde hair immaculately twisted into a bun, her gray tailored suit looking more like a CEO's armor than funeral attire. She didn't stand. She didn't smile. "Well," Brooke said, barely looking up. "You brought the child." Ava didn't flinch. "She's his granddaughter." "And you're still his daughter?" Rick muttered from the side, swirling a glass of whiskey that he definitely didn't wait until noon to pour. "Could have fooled me." Ava said nothing. She took the only empty seat, far from the head of the table, near the dusty fireplace her father used to read beside. Harper climbed into the chair beside her, legs swinging slightly above the floor. Her silence was unnerving, too still for a child. She was reading the room better than most adults ever could. It had been nearly a decade since Ava walked away from this family. She left not in disgrace, but in desperation, carrying Harper in one arm and a suitcase in the other. Her marriage to Theo, the tempestuous artist Walter never approved of, had imploded in a blur of shouting and broken things. She came back then, knocked on the heavy oak door, rain clinging to her coat, Harper crying in her arms. But no one opened it. She never tried again. "I assume we can proceed now, that everyone has decided to grace us with their presence," Brooke said, her voice slicing through the quiet like ice on glass. Ava's breath caught, but she kept her face composed. She didn't come for vengeance. She didn't come for money. She came because Harper had whispered something to her the night before, voice barely audible in the dark. "If Grandpa still remembered you, you'd want to know, right?" So she came. For Harper, for herself, maybe even for him. Mr. Whitaker, the family's longtime lawyer, entered with a thick folder and an expression that seemed older than the years on his face. He greeted the room with practiced solemnity, but when his eyes met Ava's, something in him paused. Just for a second. She saw it, the weight of something unspoken. "As executor of Walter Bennett's estate," Mr. Whitaker began, "I will now proceed with the reading of his final will and testament." Ava braced herself. She already knew what was coming. Brooke had made sure to tell her, on Christmas Day no less, that their father had cut her out, that she'd been officially erased, one signature at a time. But that wasn't the real reason Ava's pulse thundered in her ears. There was something else, a memory, a whisper. 3 weeks ago, she found a small white envelope tucked inside Harper's backpack. Her daughter claimed she'd gotten it a while back from Grandpa Walter himself. It was sealed with old-school brown tape, labeled in her father's unmistakable block handwriting. For Whitaker. Only if it gets ugly. Ava didn't know what to make of it. She had considered tossing it. She had considered never coming today. But she didn't. And now, here they were, caught between past wounds and a secret waiting to be revealed. Mr. Whitaker read the will, and every line landed like a stone in her stomach. To Brooke, he left the house. To Rick, the lake cabin. To Tyler, the vintage car collection. To Ava, nothing. And as previously stated, Whitaker said slowly, flipping a page, my youngest daughter, Ava Bennett, shall receive no portion of the estate. The words dropped like ice into the room. Brooke exhaled sharply, victorious. Tyler leaned back, smirking. Rick said nothing, but his silence was its own brand of cruelty. Ava sat still. Then Harper tugged gently at Mr. Whitaker's sleeve. Sir, she said softly, you forgot something. The room blinked. Brooke scoffed. This is not a playground, Harper. But Harper reached into her backpack and placed the sealed envelope on the table. He said you'd need this. He said, if people forgot something important. Whitaker's hands moved slowly, like he already knew what was inside. He opened the envelope, and a small USB drive slid onto the wood with a quiet click. He looked at it for a long moment. This is a video Walter recorded prior to signing his final revision, he said, more to himself than the room. I was instructed to play it only if the situation warranted it. Legally inadmissible, Brooke snapped. There's no proof that. But Whitaker was already moving toward the laptop on the side table. The screen flickered to life. Walter appeared, seated in his old study chair, wearing the cardigan Ava had knit him back in college. His hair was silver, but his eyes were sharp, clearer than she remembered. If you're watching this, he said, then I didn't fix this in time, and for that I'm sorry. Ava froze. His voice cracked. I made a mistake, not just in the will, in judgment, in believing stories instead of asking questions. No one in the room moved. I saw you, Ava, he said, his eyes almost moist. That night you came back. You were standing in the rain. You didn't look like someone escaping. You looked like someone fighting to survive. Brooke's hands twitched. I didn't open the door, and I've regretted that every damn day since. Ava's throat tightened. She couldn't look away. In my final will, my real will, I've corrected that. Whitaker turned from the screen, his voice firm. A revised, notarized copy is in my possession. Walter Bennett leaves his primary estate, liquid assets, and a scholarship fund for Harper Bennett in full to Ava Bennett. Gasps. Silence. A chair scraped loudly as Brooke stood, pale and trembling. No, he wouldn't. The video was still playing. You were the strongest of them all, Ava, Walter said. And Harper, she told me once, Mom is the safest place in the world. That's all I needed to hear. The screen went black. Ava sat frozen. Harper leaned into her side. And suddenly, the room that had once erased her now pulsed with undeniable truth. Would you have walked back into the room that abandoned you, just for a chance to hear the truth? Is forgiveness more powerful when it comes too late or just in time? She had come for closure. But what she found was something far more dangerous. The truth no one wanted her to hear. Ava stood frozen, the screen still dark, her father's final words echoing in the hollow of her chest. Around her, the air had shifted, not with warmth or welcome, but with something far heavier. Disbelief, resentment, maybe even fear. She could feel it coming off Brooke in waves, could see it in the way her sister clenched her jaw, knuckles pale against the back of the chair. Tyler was already halfway to the door, muttering something about calling his lawyer. Rick hadn't moved, just stared at Ava, his glass now untouched on the table. I want to see the paperwork, Brooke said sharply, her voice cracking just enough to betray the fury beneath her controlled facade. This is a mistake, a misunderstanding. Dad would never. He did, Mr. Whitaker interrupted, his tone calm but resolute. He recorded the video 2 weeks before his passing. I was present for the signing of the revised will. Everything has been filed, time-stamped, and notarized. There's no ambiguity here. Brooke let out a bitter laugh, the kind that hides panic behind performance. So what, she gets everything now? After abandoning him for years? After showing up with her little sob story and wide-eyed daughter? Ava didn't move. She didn't flinch. But Harper did. The little girl turned to Brooke, voice soft but steady. Mom didn't leave him. He closed the door. The room silenced again, this time with a deeper kind of discomfort. Mr. Whitaker cleared his throat, gathering the remaining documents. The revised estate will go into effect immediately. Ava, There will be follow-up paperwork to sign. I'll stay behind to walk you through the details. Everyone else, you'll receive your copies in due course. Brooke didn't move. Her eyes didn't leave Ava. This isn't over, she said flatly, voice low and trembling with a dangerous kind of calm. Ava nodded, not in defiance, but in tired recognition. It never really started. One by one, they left. Brooke stormed out without saying another word. Tyler followed, his phone already to his ear. Rick lingered just long enough to deliver a parting stare that could have sliced skin. And then they were alone. Just Ava, Harper, and Mr. Whitaker in the house that once cast them out. The silence that settled wasn't the kind Ava feared. It was heavier, yes, but honest. She knelt beside Harper, brushing a curl behind her ear. "You okay?" Harper nodded, but her voice was quieter than before. "Do you think they hate us now?" Ava paused. "I think they hated what they thought we were, not who we really are." Whitaker watched them for a moment, then stepped forward. "There's something else," he said. "Something I wasn't sure I'd share, but given today's outcome." He reached into the folder again, pulling out a second envelope, smaller, cream-colored, and worn at the edges. "He wrote you a letter," he said gently. "A private one, dated the same day as the video." Ava stared at the envelope like it was radioactive. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it, the familiar scrawl of her father's writing striking something deep in her ribs. She didn't open it. Not yet. "I'm going to walk Harper around the house," she said quietly, "just for a bit." Whitaker nodded, stepping aside. "Take your time. I'll be here." They moved together through the halls, rooms Ava hadn't seen in nearly 10 years. The study with the old green-shaded lamp, the dining room with her mother's favorite china still locked behind glass. And finally, the bedroom. Walter's bedroom. It smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. His slippers were still tucked under the bed. His robe hung behind the door, exactly where Ava remembered it. Harper tiptoed to the dresser and ran a hand along the edge. "He kept the music box," she said softly. Ava followed her gaze. It was there. The little wooden box Ava had made in high school shop class, still intact, still bearing the crooked carving. "To Dad. Love always." She turned away quickly, afraid the tears would come again. She sat on the edge of the bed, envelope still clutched in her hand. "I don't know if I want to open it," she said, mostly to herself. Harper didn't press. She just sat beside her mother, quietly waiting. But when Ava did tear the envelope open, the letter inside wasn't what she expected. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession, a secret. "I should have told you this a long time ago," it began. "But I didn't have the courage." Ava's breath caught. I cut you out because I believed you betrayed me. But the truth is, someone else made sure I would believe it." He named her, Brooke. She hadn't just told their father Ava left selfishly. She had shown him forged emails, fabricated bank withdrawals, a staged photo, enough poison to sever their bond completely. Ava felt the room spin. Her heart hammered, cold and sharp in her chest. The betrayal wasn't just familial. It had been methodical, planned. Brooke hadn't just wanted her gone. She needed her erased. "I wanted to believe you'd come back to explain," Walter's letter went on. "And when you did, I watched from the window. I saw the suitcase, the rain. I saw Harper in your arms, but I didn't open the door because I thought you came to take what didn't belong to you." Ava folded the letter slowly, hands shaking. Her father had died believing a lie, and Brooke had lived a decade building it. She looked at Harper, whose eyes were filled with questions she was too young to ask. Ava didn't speak. She just held the girl close. Some truths couldn't be undone, but they could be faced. Would you risk peace to uncover a lie, even if the truth could break your heart all over again? Ava stood slowly, the letter tight in her hand, the storm in her chest rising. She had thought this was the end, but now it was only the beginning. Ava stepped onto the back porch just as the sun began to sink below the trees. The sky was bleeding gold and rose into the stretch of dusk, casting long shadows over the garden her father once tended with quiet devotion. The letter felt like it had weight, heavier than paper, heavier than truth. Her fingers trembled around its folds. Inside, Harper had fallen asleep, curled up on the couch in the front parlor, her head resting on one of the embroidered cushions Ava remembered from her childhood. The music box sat beside her open, playing the faint, tinkling melody Ava once danced to, barefoot, in that very same room. She stood in silence for a long while. Then, behind her, the creak of a door. Mr. Whitaker stepped out, his voice low. "You read it," Ava nodded. He didn't ask what it said. He didn't have to. "I had my suspicions," he said after a beat. "There were things over the years, conversations with your father that didn't add up, but he was proud. And Brooke was persistent." Ava turned to him, her voice brittle. "He believed I stole from him, that I manipulated accounts, lied. She fabricated everything. She made me into a villain so carefully, it was easy for him to stop seeing me. She was afraid," Whitaker said, "afraid that your return meant losing her place. So she made sure there was no room left for you." Ava looked down at the grass, silent. "She'll contest the will," Whitaker added, quieter. "You know that." "I don't care," Ava replied, her voice suddenly steadier than she expected. "She can scream, she can claw, she can say what she wants. But the truth is in his voice, it's in his eyes. And now, it's mine to carry." Whitaker studied her for a long moment, then gave a solemn nod and returned inside. Ava remained, alone with the twilight, alone with her ghosts. She didn't sleep that night. After tucking Harper into the guest bedroom upstairs, the same room Ava used to stare out of when thunderstorms scared her as a child, she stayed in her father's study, surrounded by the scent of old books and faded cigar smoke. She reopened the letter. This time, not to be hurt, but to understand. The last paragraph struck her harder than any accusation. "I don't know if I deserve forgiveness. Maybe I was a coward. Maybe I let the wrong voices shape what I believed about you. But if this letter reaches you, and you're reading it, then know this. I loved you. I never stopped. I was just too proud to say it before it was too late." She folded it carefully, pressed it to her chest, and let the ache settle without pushing it away. In the days that followed, the estate remained quiet. Brooke didn't return, though her lawyer did, filed the expected documents to contest the will. But Whitaker was methodical, experienced, and more importantly, he had the video, the time-stamped will, and the truth. The challenge would fail. Still, Ava didn't stay for the fight. 3 weeks after the reading, she packed her car with only a few bags and a folder of legal documents. The house was hers, yes. But the memories, those still needed time to settle. "Where are we going?" Harper asked as Ava buckled her into the back seat. Ava smiled. "We're going to find somewhere new. Not to escape, just to begin." They left in the early morning. Fog still clung to the fields. The road stretched ahead, uncertain, open. They drove in silence for a long while until Harper broke it. "Do you think Grandpa knew what she did? In the end?" Ava didn't answer right away. She stared out at the trees blurring past, then finally said, "I think he saw enough. Maybe not everything, but enough to change his mind. That's all we can ask for, isn't it?" Harper nodded, turning her gaze back to the window. They stopped at a small lake upstate, where Ava found a cozy rental with creaky floors and a porch swing that groaned like it remembered laughter. The air was cleaner. The nights were quieter. They stayed for a while. No plan, just space. Each day, Ava would sit by the water and sketch. Not houses or floor plans, like she used to do at her desk job, but pieces of memory. Windows, doors, staircases she remembered climbing as a girl. Shapes of spaces that held things too big for words. Harper started drawing too. Her first sketch was of a tree, its roots deep and tangled, but still growing. One evening, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a photo, a copy of an old family portrait. The original had Ava cut out. But this one, she was there, standing next to her father, holding a baby Harper in her arms. A sticky note was attached. "Thought this belonged to you." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakably Brooke's. Ava held the photo for a long time, unsure whether it was an olive branch or an apology wrapped in silence. Maybe it didn't matter. She slipped it into a frame and placed it on the shelf beside the music box. Somewhere along the way, forgiveness had stopped being something she needed from them. It had started becoming something she gave herself. As fall came, Ava knew they would eventually return to the house. It would no longer feel like exile. It would be home, transformed by truth, not erased by bitterness. Her father hadn't left her much in life, but in death, he gave her back her name. And in the quiet that followed, she discovered that being seen, truly seen, wasn't about being right. It was about being known and still chosen. Would you choose truth even if it comes too late to fix the past? If you felt this story deeply, comment 100 below. Where are you watching from? Tag a friend who needs to hear this and share the story forward.